It's the checklist mentality. I've got a plan. We're going to do a workshop. This person's going to get a 360 and that person's going to get a coach. We have a checklist mentality. We did it. We were busy and we got something done. What I found is that most of the time there's no analytical, critical thought process behind all of these strategies. It makes us feel good to be busy and to build a plan. Building a plan, there's nothing that feels better than having a plan. And I often say a plan is a guide, not a God. But plans don't work if you don't understand the entire situation. I've learned this over years and years and years of teaching this, coaching this. You can have a plan, you can have a workshop, you can have all kinds of things to do, a book club, um, facilitation meetings. And I often say you might as well have a clown and a pizza party if it's about making people like each other for the afternoon, because without some deeper development, generally these plans, they fail after a week or two. So there's a checklist mentality. We did it. We did it. It's been documented. It's been documented. So if it's been documented, it's documented, and that did something. But poor documentation can cause even bigger problems. We see that SHRM, that's Human Resources Association. What does it mean for HR? They got a 11.5 million verdict against them. And this had to do with some documentation, I believe, but I was following this case when it was going on back in 2021, and I took note of it because I'd been doing this research and the work on my book, and I saw something that's a common thread that I'd like to point out, that the manager before gave a person great evaluations. And so when a new manager came in, that new manager gave the same person different evaluations, different documentation. So the person in question felt that they were being discriminated against, because why would one manager think that they're great and the next manager not? I don't know. We may never know. Maybe the work product wasn't as good in the beginning, but that manager just didn't want to have the hassle. So they just never said anything. That could be a possibility. The point here is more than whether or not it happened. The point is that when you change managers, being able to look at documentation and how each manager viewed their people is going to be really important to protect yourself. And my work is not so much about protection as it is about relationships and honesty and helping people to get up to speed. But I thought that was a really interesting case. I'm sure there's going to be more because they're going to go to appeals. But very interesting piece here with the top organization that to that position. It's a lot easier. They let down their guard and they are able to stay with you in the conversation. And so here is where the part 2 employee clarity in my model goes. And these are skills that the leader develops. And that is the problem is telling instead of coaching, checklist mentality, and getting distracted in the conversation. The skills to combat these problems is cultivating curiosity, thinking like a consultant. This is probably one of the more difficult, where you have to spend a little bit more time because this is a learned skill that you have to have practice. But when you learn to think like a consultant, you're not taking anything at face value. You're understanding how this is affecting the business, and you're saying there's always going to be a lack of clarity somewhere. I always say in all drama, there's always a lack of clarity. You're going to also say it could be a combination of, or it could be one of these other issues. It could be a priority issue. It could be a skill issue, a resource, or a willingness. We often think it's a willingness issue right off the bat because we're defensive. We're like, they don't care. They don't want to. They're just not willing. Very often, though, the priorities have shifted over and over again, and that has created a lack of clarity as well. Or they really didn't get the skill training, which is so true for a lot of managers and leaders about having conversations. They just don't have the skill. They just don't have the skill. It is a skill. And so once you understand this, you can say it's one of these. It's one or a combination. It'll always be a combination of clarity and something else. But the skills that we teach for that is to cultivate curiosity, to think like a consultant, radical listening, which will help you in all of your relationships, and then testing for resistance and using what I call the magic phrase. This one also takes some work, but it's really fun. There's some fun ways to apply this even in your personal life. So I'm going to go to the number 10 mistake, and then we'll do a review, and I'm going to share with you what I've created for that problem. So the number 10 mistake is using accountability as punishment. You're going to see in the background there a quadrant, and what I've developed, and this is not only in my book, this is a body of work I've been doing for a while. It's actually also in No Drama Leadership. I've really made a distinction between responsibility and accountability. And once you make that distinction, you can't see it you'll see it so differently. You will not be muddled about what's responsible and what's accountable. And what you want is both. But when we say, well, we don't really have a method for people to be responsible, we use the words responsibility and accountability intermixed. What happens is you start using accountability as punishment. And that's in that fourth quadrant, where there's high accountability but low responsibility. What you actually want is to be in quadrant 2, which is high responsibility, high accountability. Here's some research. Accountability is incorrectly perceived as strictly consequential and almost entirely after the fact. Of those surveyed, 80% say feedback only happens when things go wrong or not at all. That's why with a coaching mindset, you're constantly giving feedback. You are talking about what's working, what's not working. How could we switch things up? What is your opinion? You're coaching. You're not just harping on what someone's doing wrong. And it's not only when things aren't going well. You're constantly keeping your eye on how you can support your team and how you are the mentor, the coach, the one that's helping them to be all that they can be. Accountability. When it comes to holding others accountable, 82% of the survey participants say they try, but they fail or they avoid it altogether. So accountability is a big issue. I used to not like accountability because of the way that I saw it. But now that I see accountability as measurement and I see responsibility as ownership, when I really own something, I want the accountability. I want to measure. I want to get better. And the only way I can get better is if there's some sort of measurement. So once you switch your ideas and your interpretation of these terms, it's amazing how much fun it is to actually kind of play the game of business. So I want to share with you something that is in all of my work as well. This is in the Performance Coaching Model video series. We want accountability and responsibility. So responsibility is ownership. It's of the heart. I own it. I take it. It's mine. Accountability is of the head. It's about measurement. It's about this knowledge of what's working, what's not working. Is it 12 feet? Is it 2 feet? Is it heavy? Is it light? Is it 25 pounds? Is it 5 pounds? So accountability is numeric, and there's always a witness. There's always someone coaching, helping, observing with you. What you want in your workplace is a combination of both accountability and responsibility. You want your head plugged into your heart. And when you have that, here's what it looks like. You have high responsibility. So in other words, high ownership, high engagement, but you also have high accountability. So you're looking at how do we measure? And also these people are really responsive. They're responsible. They want to be measured. And so this is what it looks like. Part 3 is accountability in the model. So the problem is seeing accountability as punitive. What we teach is how to set up the leader-employee agreement with next steps and follow-up. It's baked into every conversation. So there's no guessing, because here's what happens. When you don't bake in your accountability and you assume that your conversation landed, the longer you put off the conversation, the more stress you build up. By the time you finally have the conversation, let's say it was even pretty good, you did a good job, you feel this glow, you feel happy, you feel better feelings toward that person. They feel okay towards you. Maybe you shake hands, maybe you hug, maybe there's some tears. You feel like you're on the same page, you're aligned, and you're like, wow, I'm never going to have to go through that again. I did it. I'm proud of myself. And then as time creeps on, 3 weeks later, the same problem starts to emerge and you wonder what happened. What happened is that there was no accountability baked in, and perhaps there was a skill that was missed. Perhaps it was appeasing an agreement. I'll do it. I'll try. I mean to, but there was no real accountability. So the relationship got in the way, and you wanted them to save face. You wanted to like them. They wanted to like you, and there was never any real movement forward. So here's where we have been. Let's look at this. The 10 mistakes to avoid. Winging it which is a lack of confidence, inability to articulate the situation, don't know where to start, assuming and interpreting, a problem orientation versus outcome orientation, failure to connect the dots, a checklist mentality, getting distracted in conversations, and using accountability as punishment. So those are the 10 mistakes. And as I said, there's dozens. Honestly, I could make 10 more and make a whole other webinar off of 10 more. And here's what it looks like. Now, in the performance coaching model, the first section is building the foundation. And that is actually the planning and the leadership clarity tool where we discern what are they doing, what are they not doing, who's involved, and how it affects the business. After the planning, here's the model. There's the leadership clarity, which is setting intention, naming the behavior, speaking to the vision, and stating the case. There's the employee clarity. We've just talked about that, cultivating curiosity, thinking like a consultant with the 5 different buckets where you're analyzing what's going on, radical listening and testing for resistance using the magic phrase, and then finally, baking in the accountability. So I'm offering this performance coaching model. You'll be getting an email about that. It is regularly $749. Today, it's $349. You're going to get 48 hours of access, 48 hours for the recording. So you can watch this again. You can share it with your other leaders, your team, your executives, and you get lifetime access to the performance coaching model for right now. And so for $349, you've got lifetime access. And if you want to get an enterprise license, you can talk with me separately. Or if you want to buy for 10 people, we can work on that, and it would be easier to do in person. But here's the next steps. Set a meeting to explore your leadership development. Email me, reach out. If you'd like to host this webinar for your organization, for your chamber of commerce, for your association, let's talk. If you're interested in licensing the performance coaching model or partnership, then get back with me. So the performance coaching model is on sale right now, and it is $349. You'll get a link, and you'll also get this recording where you can watch this again. You'll get a link that even shows you the inside of the course. So thank you so much for joining me, and I've appreciated your attention, and I'm here to answer any questions. So have a good day.